Did you know that a woman named Rahab, known for being a prostitute, became a fundamental part of one of the most incredible stories in the Bible? Rahab lived in Jericho, a powerful city surrounded by immense walls. She had a past full of difficulties and choices that caused her to be looked down upon by society. However, in a decisive moment, she made a courageous decision that changed everything. She chose to hide the spies that Joshua had sent to explore the city. Rahab risked her own life and that of her family by doing this, all to protect men whom, until that moment, she barely knew. But what led her to have such great courage and faith? What did she perceive at that moment that no one else saw? In this video, we will understand the story of this unexpected woman who, despite her scars and mistakes from the past, became an example of faith, courage, and transformation. Her story teaches us that no matter how distant we may feel from God, He always has a greater plan and can use anyone to fulfill His purposes. You cannot miss this impressive story of redemption and purpose. Rahab was a prostitute who lived in the ancient city of Jericho, one of the most fortified and powerful centers in the land of Canaan, when the people of Israel, led by Joshua, were preparing to invade and conquer the region. Rahab is often remembered among Christians because of her intriguing story filled with twists, narrated in the book of Joshua, chapters 2 and 6, but also mentioned in other parts of the Bible, such as the New Testament, in the books of Hebrews and James. In Hebrew, the name Rahab is probably related to a root meaning wide or broad, which may have special symbolism as her story connects to an act of generosity and faith that impacted the destiny of an entire nation. According to the biblical text in the book of Joshua, between chapters 2 and 6, Rahab lived in a house strategically located on the walls of Jericho, which provided her with a privileged view of those entering and leaving the city. This location was essential for Rahab to play a crucial role in protecting the spies sent by Joshua, who had the mission of exploring and observing the city's defenses for the people of Israel. The spies were sent with the task of assessing the fortification and better understanding the conditions of Jericho, a city known for its imposing walls and military power. They needed to gather information that would be vital for the future conquest of Canaan. However, despite acting cautiously, the presence of the Israelite spies did not go unnoticed. Somehow, the news that foreigners had entered the city with suspicious intentions quickly reached the knowledge of the king of Jericho. Suspicious and worried about the possibility of an invasion, the king immediately sent messengers to Rahab's house, demanding that she hand over the men he believed were there. Then Rahab, with cunning and courage, hid the two spies among the stalks of flax that were drying on the roof of her house, an unlikely hiding place, but one that proved effective. She knew that by doing this, she was putting her own life at risk, as harboring enemies of Jericho would be considered an act of treason by the king and his men. When the king's messengers arrived at her house, Rahab remained calm and with a firm attitude gave them a false lead, saying that the men had already left at nightfall and that if they hurried they could catch up with them before they crossed the fords of the Jordan. Believing her information, the soldiers rushed off, leaving Rahab's house and her visitors safe. After misleading the king's guards, Rahab went up to the roof to speak with the spies, and it was at that moment that her true faith was revealed. She was not just a woman acting out of self-interest, she had recognized the greatness and sovereignty of the God of the Hebrews. With courage, Rahab declared her belief in the God of Israel, telling the spies that she had heard of the mighty deeds he had performed on behalf of his people. She recounted how the residents of Jericho were terrified because they knew that Israel had been miraculously delivered from Egypt, that God had parted the Red Sea for them to pass, and that He led them to victory against the Amorite kings, Sihon and Og, who ruled the lands east of the Jordan. Rahab explained that these reports had spread throughout the city and that the hearts of the people of Jericho had melted with fear, for they all recognized that the God of Israel was different from any other, a true and powerful God who ruled both the heavens and the earth. She knew that the conquest of Jericho was inevitable, and instead of resisting, she chose to ally herself with the people of Israel, believing that their God was sovereign. This moment was a significant milestone, as Rahab's confession of faith not only demonstrated her knowledge of God's actions, but also her decision to submit to him, abandoning her pagan gods and trusting that the God of the Hebrews could offer salvation for her and her family. This act of faith, coming from a woman who until then was a foreigner living on the margins of society, revealed that God's plan included and valued people from all backgrounds and histories, regardless of their pasts. Then Rahab, showing wisdom and concern for her loved ones, made a sincere and urgent request to the spies. She knew that by protecting those men, she had taken a great risk, but now she saw an opportunity to save not only her own life, but also that of her entire family. Rahab pleaded with the spies that when Israel attacked Jericho, they would remember her act of loyalty and mercy, ensuring that she and her family members would be spared from the destruction that was to come. The spies, impressed by Rahab's courage and faith, agreed to honor her request, but under one specific condition. She had to follow their instructions precisely to ensure the safety of everyone. They explained that Rahab needed to tie a scarlet cord in her window, the same window through which the spies were about to escape. This red cord would be the visible sign for the Israelites to identify her house during the attack. The scarlet color, vibrant and clearly visible, would serve as a distinct mark, setting Rahab's house apart from the many others that made up the walls of the city of Jericho. The scarlet cord was not just a simple physical sign. For many scholars, it also carried a deep symbolic meaning. The red shade was associated with blood and redemption, something that pointed to the future coming of Jesus Christ, whose sacrifice would redeem humanity. For Rahab, the cord represented hope and protection, an act of faith in trusting the promise made by those men who served the Almighty God. The spies also reinforced the rules of the agreement. All of Rahab's family members needed to be inside her house when the invasion began. She had to gather her father, her mother, her siblings, and keep them there, for anyone who was outside the house at the time of the attack would not be protected by the agreement. This instruction was not only a practical measure, but also a test of Rahab's faith and her ability to influence and convince her family to take shelter in the house that would soon become the only safe place in all of Jericho. Rahab accepted the agreement with seriousness, aware that following those instructions precisely was essential for the survival of all those she loved. She would tie the scarlet cord carefully and make sure her family members were gathered and prepared. Her role as protector and mediator between the spies and her family demonstrated her determination and her growing faith in the God of Israel. After sealing the agreement, Rahab helped the spies descend through the window, ensuring that they escaped without being seen. This window, strategically located on the city walls, would not only become the escape route for the men she had helped, but also the point of salvation for her own family. By hanging the red cord there, Rahab sealed her commitment to God and the people of Israel, making her house a symbol of hope amidst the imminent destruction that was to come. This alliance made between Rahab and the spies was fundamental to the outcome of the story of Jericho, and her act of faith would become a reminder that, regardless of a person's past, God can use them powerfully in His plan, turning seemingly impossible situations into miracles of salvation and redemption. After the army of Israel, under Joshua's leadership, surrounded Jericho for 7 days, according to the instructions given by God, one of the most miraculous events recorded in the Bible occurred. The impenetrable walls of the city fell at the sound of the trumpets and the shouts of the Israelite warriors. The walls, which were seen as a symbol of strength and security for the inhabitants of Jericho, collapsed completely, leaving the city vulnerable to attack. The army of Israel entered and conquered the city, destroying everything as God had commanded. Jericho, a center of idolatry and resistance against the people of God, was completely destroyed, except for one single place that remained intact: Rahab's house. Rahab and her family, who were sheltered together in the house on the wall, were spared as per the agreement made with the spies. The scarlet cord that Rahab had tied in the window served as a visible sign for the Israelites, ensuring that they identified and preserved that specific location amid the total destruction. Rahab's faithfulness in following the instructions was rewarded when Joshua's soldiers, upon seeing the scarlet cord, rescued Rahab and all her family members. They were escorted out of the city safely, while the rest of Jericho was devastated. This moment marked the fulfillment of the promise made by the spies, and even more, God's faithfulness in honoring those who demonstrate true faith. Rahab, who was once a foreigner and a marginalized woman in the society of Jericho, saw her life completely transformed. She and her family, who were condemned to death like all the other inhabitants of the city, were spared, and more than that, welcomed by the people of Israel. Later, Rahab and her family members not only survived the destruction of Jericho, but they were also integrated into the people of Israel, becoming naturalized Israelites. This is confirmed by the account in the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verse 25, where the biblical text states, "But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute, her family, and all that she had, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and Rahab lives among the Israelites to this day." This verse highlights that Rahab was honored and accepted as part of God's people, leaving a lasting legacy. Rahab's integration into the Israelite people was not merely a matter of survival, it was a process of transformation and acceptance that fully involved her in the culture and faith of the people she had chosen to follow. By becoming part of the people of Israel, Rahab renounced the old pagan beliefs of Jericho and began to serve the God of Israel, adopting a new identity and a new purpose in life. She was not only welcomed as a foreigner, she was honored and respected among the people, demonstrating that the transformative power of God's grace can reach anyone, regardless of their origin or past. Moreover, Rahab's story did not end with her acceptance as an Israelite. She married Salmon, one of the respected leaders of the tribe of Judah, and from this union Boaz was born, a man of great importance in the biblical narrative, who later married Ruth, another foreign woman of great faith. Boaz, in turn, became the great-grandfather of King David, directly connecting Rahab's story to the lineage of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Rahab's transformation from a prostitute in Jericho to an ancestor of King David and Jesus is a testimony to the power of faith and divine redemption. Her story illustrates that, regardless of a person's past, God is capable of rewriting their destiny and using them to fulfill His purposes. Throughout generations, Rahab continued to be remembered as an example of faith and obedience. Her name is mentioned in the New Testament, in the books of Hebrews and James, as a model of faith that resulted in concrete and transformative actions. She proved that when someone chooses to trust and obey the true God, that act of faith can change their life's story and impact future generations. Finally, Rahab's story is highlighted in the New Testament, especially in the Epistle to the Hebrews, chapter 11, known as the Hall of Heroes of Faith. This chapter is a list of great biblical figures who demonstrated extraordinary faith in God, and it is remarkable that Rahab, a foreign woman with a questionable reputation, is included alongside figures such as Abraham, Moses, and Noah. The writer of the letter emphasizes Rahab's faith as a notable example, highlighting that by her faith, she welcomed the spies in peace, despite the great risk it posed to her own life and her family's. This mention in Hebrews reveals that Rahab's faith was not merely a feeling or an inner belief, it was a faith manifested through action. In a decisive moment, she chose to trust the God of Israel and act with courage, hiding the spies and helping them escape. Even knowing that the punishment for harboring spies was death, Rahab acted with determination, believing that the God of the Hebrews was true and powerful. Her faith was not passive, but active and transformative, and that is why she is celebrated in the Hall of Heroes of Faith, showing that true faith goes beyond words. It is lived out through bold and courageous actions. Moreover, Rahab's story is mentioned again in the New Testament in the letter of James chapter 2 verse 25, where he highlights Rahab's good works as expressions of her authentic faith. James, when writing about the importance of demonstrating faith through concrete actions, uses Rahab as a perfect example of how faith and works must go hand in hand. He argues that just as Abraham demonstrated his faith by offering his son Isaac, Rahab proved her faith by welcoming and protecting the spies. For James, Rahab embodies the truth that faith without works is dead. The act of hiding the spies and guiding them on a safe escape route was not merely an act of kindness or hospitality, but an expression of courageous faith based on her belief that the God of Israel was the true God and that she could trust in his promises. This recognition demonstrates that Rahab did not just believe in God, she acted according to that belief, transforming her faith into practical and decisive action. The inclusion of Rahab in the New Testament as an example of faith and action is significant for several reasons. First, it highlights that in God's kingdom there is no distinction of status, gender, or past. Anyone can be an instrument of his will. Rahab, a woman with a past of prostitution and from a people who were enemies of Israel, was welcomed and honored as a heroine of faith, showing that God's grace is inclusive and redemptive. Second, Rahab's story illustrates how true faith is rewarded. Rahab not only had her life and that of her family spared, but she was integrated into the people of God and became part of his story of redemption. This inclusion in the New Testament texts serves as a lasting testimony that God values genuine faith and the courage to act on that faith, regardless of a person's circumstances or past. Rahab's story is a powerful reminder that true faith always manifests in actions. The transformation she experienced by being included in the family of Israel and eventually in the lineage of Jesus Christ is an example of how God can redeem and give new purpose to those who choose to follow him. That is why her mention in the Hall of Heroes of Faith and in the letter of James is not just a recognition of her actions, but an eternal lesson that when we trust and act in faith, God can use us in extraordinary ways to fulfill his plans. Now write in the comments if you already knew the story of Rahab in the Bible, leave a like on the video, and share this message with more people. May God bless you.